Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining us tonight, and I sincerely hope wherever you are that you are safe and well, and I appreciate you spending this next hour with us. I'll get right to it. My opening observations are this. Normally on a Monday, I would say to you that I hope you enjoyed a good weekend. But if you were like me and you were watching news operations throughout the cities of America reporting on the riots and on the protests taking place in so many cities, well, chances are it was not a good weekend. Chances are, like me, you were saying the weekend was long, emotional, disturbing, sad, and an ugly chapter in our modern American history. I mean, here we are faced with a COVID-19 pandemic, and we're dealing with this epidemic of systemic racism and violence. And we find ourselves at a crossroads of wondering, where do we go from here? Well, in order to get to that place called greatness, I've often said that the greatness of a nation begins in the homes of its people. That means in our homes, we must work on becoming better, not bitter, and reaching out to find common ground for the greater good of all of America. But we must not overlook what's wrong with the systemic issues here in America. That means we have to deal with it face to face, eye to eye, nose to nose, and let people know that this type of violence inflicted on African Americans and the abuse of power that it has and the sense of entitlement that it portrays is over, done. Because we must be better, we must be greater, and we must stand for justice and righteousness in this country. And those are my opening observations. And beyond my opening observations, I noted that over the weekend, there were several leaders in this country who stepped forward to denounce what was going on with the George Floyd case, as well as the violence that's erupted through the protests. One in particular was New York Governor Andrew Cuomo.
For 90 days, we were just dealing with the COVID crisis. On the 91st day, we have the COVID crisis, and we have the situation in Minneapolis with the racial unrest around the George Floyd death. Those are not disconnected situations. One looks like a public health system issue, COVID, but it's getting at the inequality in healthcare also on a deeper level. And then the George Floyd situation, which gets at the inequality and discrimination in the criminal justice system. They are connected. The George Floyd death was not just about George Floyd, and we wish his family peace, and they're in our thoughts and prayers. But we tend to look at these situations as individual incidents. They're not individual incidents. When you have one episode, 2 episodes, maybe you can look at them as individual episodes. But when you have 10 episodes, 15 episodes, you are blind or in denial if you are still treating each one like a unique situation. We have an injustice in the criminal justice system that is abhorrent. That is the truth. It doesn't make me feel good to say that. I'm a former prosecutor. We have injustice in the criminal justice system, which is the basic purveyor of justice in this society. And it's not just George Floyd. You look back even in modern history, in my lifetime, this started with Rodney King. Rodney King was 30 years ago. We suffered in this city through Abner Louima and Amadou Diallo and Sean Bell and Eric Garner. How many times have we seen the same situation? Yes, the names change, but the color doesn't. And that is the painful reality of this situation. And it's not just 30 years. It is this nation's history of discrimination and racism dating back hundreds of years. That is the honest truth, and that's what's behind this anger and frustration. And I share the outrage at this fundamental injustice. I do. And that's why I say I figuratively stand with the protesters. But violence is not the answer. It never is the answer. As a matter of fact, it is counterproductive, because the violence then obscures the righteousness of the message and the mission. And you lose the point by the violence in response. And it allows people who would choose to scapegoat to point to the violence rather than the action that created the reaction. The violence allows people to talk about the violence as opposed to honestly addressing the situation that incited the violence. The violence doesn't work. Martin Luther King, Dr. King, God rest his soul, he taught us this. He taught us this. He knew better than anyone who is speaking to us today on this issue. Returning hate for hate multiplies hate. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Yes, outrage, yes, anger, yes, frustration, but not violence.
So my first guest today is legal analyst Terry Austin. She's joining me now from the New York City area where she practices law. And Terry, your background is so extensive, even being a Columbia School of Law graduate. And I just thank you for being on the program today. I want to get into this really important question about legal matters, because it's something that we need to be focused on. And one of the things that's going on, the latest statistics have revealed that more Blacks, as you know, have been susceptible to contracting COVID-19. So what are the legal ramifications stemming from this? And what should the Black communities do about the impact upon their communities due to health disparities? And how can we legally go after this?
First of all, thank you so much for having me as a guest. As you mentioned, so many Black communities are being adversely impacted by coronavirus. They are infected more and they are dying at higher rates. Historically, we know for a fact that health is absolutely related to wealth and opportunity, and there's a direct correlation. And historically, African Americans have been impacted negatively. And so if we look at housing, if we look at employment, and if we look at businesses, African Americans have also been impacted in those areas in an adverse way. So let's take a look at, first, we can talk about employment. Today, if you are sick from coronavirus and you are taking care of yourself, or you're taking care of someone else, or in fact, if you are taking care of a student who is home because they are out of school from school closings, Congress has actually passed a law, First Families Response Act to coronavirus. And that law states that you can receive 2 weeks of sick pay. And this is important. That's enough to carry families over. So you really should avail yourself of that. And it implies that small businesses, it doesn't apply to large businesses. Small businesses under 500 employees will get this package so they can pay their employees the sick pay. So you might ask, your viewers will probably want to know, what happens if I'm working for a company that's larger than 500 employees? Most of those companies already pay 2 weeks of sick pay or something thereabouts on average. So Congress has decided that they need to assist these smaller businesses in helping individuals who might be sick. And I also wanted to mention from an employment perspective that if you are in fact unemployed because your business had to do layoffs, well, you can also apply for unemployment. And we must avail ourselves of these provisions because it will help tide people over until this pandemic is over. The last thing I wanted to mention in connection with employment is workers' compensation, because many of our African American communities are working in the service industries because historically those are the opportunities that we had. And if you are impacted by coronavirus, and if in fact it's work related, then you can also receive workers' compensation.
Now, we have a problem in this country because not only are we looking at the African American community, but there's also the incarcerated community. And it really is crazy to think what's happening there in our prison systems. And as you know, unfortunately, African Americans are disproportionately imprisoned, some of them for nonviolent offenses, and some of them are not supposed to be there, but yet they are there in the midst of the coronavirus crisis. What legal remedies do prisoners have, and what attention should we be giving to them to help them deal with this coronavirus crisis?
Well, it's an extremely important point because, as you say, we are adversely impacted there, and there is no specific law in connection with coronavirus. But under the Constitution, everyone has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They have the expectation of safety and welfare. And if in fact they are not being protected from others who might have been exposed, they can bring in action against the institution for not protecting them. So it's really going to be a question at this point of standing up for your rights, demanding your rights, until such time there is a law that can be passed that says these individuals have to be protected from and have to be provided personal equipment that will provide them some safety.
You're watching The Kelly Wright Show. We'll be back with much more after this. So for those of you who perhaps are just tuning in, I'm talking to Terry Austin, legal analyst for The Kelly Wright Show. And I'm just so appreciative of Terry bringing this information to us because what this show tends to do and tries to do every day is provide you with information that's helpful, impactful, empowering, and inspiring. Now, Terry, the other issue that's out there is the stimulus package, the CARES Act. And a lot of people, business owners are really in need of loans, and it's actually it's run out of money. So what legal remedies do these businesses have? Because so many business owners, particularly in the African American community, are finding themselves at wit's end what to do to maintain a healthy, productive business, to pay their employees, and to even see their future and hope actually realized in the scope of the disruption of the COVID-19.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the fact that it has run out of money as of yesterday. That is the $349 billion, which went towards the protection of the paycheck. The $2 trillion is still there, but as you say, that's the CARES Act, the broader act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And under that act, there are actually two paychecks, the small business paycheck and the individual paycheck. So those two stimulus checks are supposed to help the economy stay afloat. And to your point, these small businesses have applied for these relief checks, and there's a backup, there's a wait. I've actually spoken to some small business owners, and while they have gotten through and while they have been promised the money is not not in their hands.
Mhm.
And as it relates to the individual checks, as you know, that's governed and administrated through the IRS. There's nothing that you have to do for that. It'll come automatically. If you have filed for 2019, they will use that information. If not, they'll use 2018. And it varies on whether you're single or joint and filed. But generally speaking, if you make more than or less than 75,000, you will get this check for 1,200. So, you know, if there's direct deposit, they're saying that that'll come a little faster. But I think many people are still waiting for those checks. Again, I've spoken to many people. I don't know anyone who has received a check yet either.
So much to discuss, Terry, just on a legal matter. And we live in a very litigious society. And certainly I can see and sense that there are going to be numerous lawsuits going out through the roof after this is all over and said and done. And we get through the coronavirus. So we better strap on and get prepared, because a lot of people will be saying, the state did this to me and I've got to fight it. But I appreciate you coming on and sharing and shedding some insight on what can be done legally, because it is a question that we have to be asking of ourselves in order to not only protect ourselves and safeguard our health, but also our wealth and our future through legal remedies and stand up for our rights. Terry Austin on the Kelly Wright Show. Appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the program. So as we've been watching so many thousands of people take to the streets and protest, one of the things we've been concerned about on this show is how will they safeguard their health and well-being, because there is a pandemic called COVID-19 that's still out there. It's a virus that we cannot see and a virus that can impact so many people. Dr. Yolandra Hancock, who is a pediatrician, as well as a member of the Milken Institute of Public Health at George Washington University, joins us now to talk about this very issue. And we've talked about it before. It's scary, not only because of the violence, but it's also scary because of the stress levels we see in the people who are protesting. They have every right to protest,
Right.
even though we don't like seeing the violence, and we don't, I don't think the violence serves any end other than causing some obscurity to George Floyd's death, which is not a good thing. But it's
Right.
also not a good thing that this is happening in the midst of a COVID pandemic. Should they be wearing masks, and what are the dangers?
Right. I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge that we're fighting two pandemics, if you will, right? The onslaught on Black life, but also the onslaught of COVID-19. And I'm right there with them in terms of the protest. It encourages me to see not just Black people, but people of all nationalities, all ages, showing up and showing out for the cause. It's heartwarming, but what makes me panic as I watch all of this playing out is the fact that people are still at risk. To tell someone to social distance in the middle of a protest, I know is impossible and impractical, but at minimum, we should be wearing a mask. COVID hasn't gone anywhere. And what we do know is that Black and Brown communities are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. And for that reason alone, our brothers and sisters need to, at minimum, be masked. So what I've asked people to do, if you cannot go out to protest, at least make sure that your loved ones, your family members, your friends are masked up. Give them a mask, encourage them to use a mask, whatever the case, because you get so caught up and so passionate about fighting for our rights that it becomes difficult to remember all the safeguards that we need to do to protect ourselves. And wearing a mask has been shown to prevent the transmission of COVID.
You mentioned our loved ones, and certainly our loved ones, especially our children, are watching these images unfold as we speak. Our little ones have watched what happened with George Floyd. So as a pediatrician, doc, how are you advising parents when their children are asking for an explanation about why is this happening?
You know, Kelly, I'll be honest with you. It's something I struggle with myself as a mother, in terms of how I communicate to my daughter in a way that does not make her question who she is or who her friends are. She's grown up in a very diverse neighborhood. We have friends from all backgrounds. And so I want to make sure that I present to her, not that this is a white versus black issue, but a narrative issue, right? I talk to her about how she perceives different things. If we go out and she sees dogs, as an example, if she's fearful, not all dogs attack you. There's some that are friendly, there's some that are not. You have to really think through, how do you think about these animals as pets? How do you think about going to school? Sometimes in second grade, school may seem hard, but first grade was easy. But if overall you think about school as a pleasant, enjoyable experience, every time you go into the situation, you go into it with optimism and hope. And that's the same thing I talk to her about African Americans here in this country. I've had honest conversations with her. We talk about slavery. We don't talk about it as, again, a black and a white issue. There were a group of people who benefited from treating another group of people as property. It just so happens that those people are black, and slavery happened. And I tell her slavery happened amongst a variety of societies. It was white, it was Latinx communities. I mean, if we're honest with each other Africans owned other Africans. And so it's a person issue for her. And I have to be very cautious in what I allow her to see. She does not have access to social media. She's not going to watch George Floyd lose his life at the hands of a police officer. But we do also talk about police and what their role should be, and how some of them do not do the job that they're supposed to, in the same way that they're good doctors and doctors that are not good. Each of us have bad apples. And I think it's an important conversation for all families to have about the dynamics. If a parent doesn't have the conversation, someone who cannot protect them will. And the perception that they develop as a result of what's playing out in our society will alter how they see their community in general and how they see themselves. So we want to be cautious, but we also want to be developmentally honest with them in what is transpiring.
Dr. Yolanda Hancock, thank you for that. And certainly it's very important that we discuss this with our children. Pretty much along the same lines that you just talked about, being responsibly and proactive to help our children understand their own identity and to appreciate who they are and who God has made them to be. I appreciate you so much coming on, Doc. I know you'll be coming back on quite a bit as we continue to follow these COVID cases. And unfortunately, this epidemic of violence against Blacks. So much to wade through.
Yes.
How are you doing, by the way, before I let you go?
I'm stressed and trying to figure out how can I be most effective in not letting myself just sit in a place of emotion, but sit in a place of action, and using my anger, frustration, devastation, and hurt in a very appropriate, God-directed way to affect change and call others to action as well.
Appreciate you. You're always welcome here. Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Yolanda Hancock. And we're back with more of the show after this. Welcome back. So I'm talking to Bernard Kinsey, and he is the owner of the Kinsey Collection, which is an extraordinary African-American collection of history. He owns that with his wife, Shirley, and of course their son, Khalil. In addition to that, he is someone who's been very active as a philanthropist and doing so much work, as I talked about earlier, to repair the breach. And Bernard, as you look across the nation and you see so many cities, rural cities, smaller cities, large cities, including the nation's capital, erupting into violence over the death of George Floyd, does it take you back to that era of Rodney King and the aftermath of that, when you saw people protesting and rioting in Los Angeles, and you had to help repair the breach then and heal the wounds? How do you see us going forward in this current time, where so many people are outraged and expressing their anger? Where do we go from here?
Well, you know, the saying, your skin speaks before you do. and as a black man, you're guilty until proven innocent. So let's put those together. If you can racially profile someone and you assume the assumption of guilt is what every black male particularly is dealt with in any contact with the police. In other words, they don't look at you with, you can have a PhD or no D, and it's the same kind of treatment. And white people don't have to go through that kind of indignity. Chris Rock has a saying that he's rich and white people don't want to trade with him. And it's true because white people know that they have privilege. Take Amy Cooper, this lady in New York with the dog in Central Park. This white woman weaponized the notion of entitlement and whiteness because she knew that she could push the button with the police that they would react to a black woman, to a white woman being assaulted by a black man. And guess what? Today is the anniversary of the Tulsa riots.
Yeah.
1921. It was called the Black Wall Street. Yep. In Greenwood, Tulsa, where thousands of businesses and black people were burned out. Why? Because of a white woman saying that a black man touched her. You follow me? Yeah. So this is pretty, so when you have the historical lens on this is also critical because white men are still dealing with this whole notion. You follow me? That some kind of way we're going to hurt their women. Okay? Yeah. So that's what's operating here. But to kind of go back to your initial question about, first of all, you need constructive dialogue. You can't, I heard someone on TV say, well, we don't want to talk to the police chief. Well, why wouldn't you want to talk to the police chief? Michael Moore, I think, is a good guy. He's trying to do a good job. And if you don't have input in then how is he going to be able to direct 9,000 police officers? You know what I mean? So the first thing we have to do is to open up the big we and be willing to talk and exchange and develop some kind of dialogue and then hopefully a relationship where you can problem solve. And that's what we did in LA. What we decided to do, we lost 47 service stations one night in LA, which meant you couldn't buy gas in South Los Angeles for almost a year, okay? And what we went back to is to Shell and Arco and to Chevron. They did not want to come back into South Los Angeles because they said, hey, we've done. Mm-hmm. And we got them to come back. They came back with over 60 service stations. We went to Vons and Ralph's and Albertson and Smart and Fowler. And we said, look, you got a market of almost 2 million people that don't have grocery stores. You follow me? Right. You can't do this just throwing rocks over the transit. You got to talk to people. They need to understand that this is not a one-way street on their side or on our side. Because without it, we're never going to have the kind of society we want. Because at the end of the day, Black people are the ones that end up being hurt in this thing. They really are. We're the ones that always pay the big price, for, these indiscretions. I have a saying that it's better to be rich and guilty than poor and innocent. Because in reality, in America, Black people don't get a fair trial. And the big problem with the policing in this country, that police are basically have immunity to prosecution. Juries don't want to convict them. Prosecutors don't want to prosecute them. And the Supreme Court, 1967, in a Mississippi case with civil rights workers, basically said, we're going to give you limited immunity, which meant, and since then it's been codified to a point that no police officer really can hardly be convicted. And that's, until you change that, people are going to see the kind of egregious behavior in 18,000 police departments around America that make tens of millions of stops a day, mostly on Black people.
Welcome back to the program. So as we continue to watch the developments unfold stemming from the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, we continue to ask the questions of how do we move forward? And of course, the whole world is watching. Proof of that is the gentleman I'm about to introduce to you. He's coming to us today from London in his home that overlooks the River Thames. And he is the only Black Lord in England's House of Lords since 1996. He became the first Black UK Conservative peer, and he is Lord Taylor of Warwick, the Right Honorable Lord John Taylor of Warwick, and he joins us today from London, and that's a great backdrop. You're overlooking the River Thames there. Lord Taylor, thanks for being a part of us. As the only, one of the only Black members to serve in the House of Parliament, what's happening in London with regards to the coronavirus and how is it impacting people throughout the UK?
Well, hello, Kelly, and greetings to you from London. And you see there the River Thames behind us. And thank you for inviting me on your show. Yes, COVID-19 has really taken everyone by surprise, but it hasn't taken God by surprise. So I believe he will turn this for good. I think it really is a question of faith, not fear. But we're beginning to come out of lockdown. You know, I know America's been in lockdown as well, but I'm really hopeful for the future. It's almost like recess to reset. You know, our whole thinking about the way we do things has to be reset. And I'm very, very optimistic that good will come out of bad.
Now, the good that comes out of that, are you also being told that under lockdown that when you do go outside that you should wear a mask and protective equipment to help safeguard yourself as well as others?
Well, this is more advice rather than instruction. It's not a question of you must do this, you must do that. People are just using their common sense. I mean, the reality is, any death is a tragedy, but COVID-19 actually causes, well, about the same amount of deaths as flu. And we will come through this. It's a tragedy, but we will come through this. I'm convinced of it.
Yeah, I agree. Here in the United States, we have a saying that we'll get through this together. And now, how has this impacted the Black community there in London and the UK?
In terms of the Black community, 4 times as many Black people die of COVID-19 as compared to their white counterparts. And so the government has started an inquiry into this. I was one of those who's pressed the government to do this. We're awaiting the results of that inquiry. There may be many reasons. It could be poverty. Some say obesity. We just don't know at the moment.
Yeah, here in America, as you know, we have the issue, and we've been telling people about the fact that it would create a lot of heartbreak in the African American community due to the health disparities that exist here. Some of the communities have food deserts and not close to medical facilities, and because of health issues like hypertension and diabetes and obesity and things of that matter. But it's also the economic inequities as well. Do you find a similar situation there in the UK?
Yes, but I think it's wrong to focus only on inequality. If you look at the history of us, the Black people, going right back to slavery and racism, we become strong, we are resilient, we are creative, we always find a way through. You know, when Daniel was in the lion's den, he didn't take him out of the lion's den, he took him through it, he survived. You know, we, the Black people, are not victims, we are victors. That's my main message. It's about our mindset. We will come through this stronger than before. Black people don't just survive, we thrive.
Communities of color being impacted not only in the UK, but as you know, here in the United States, we're going through right now a very difficult time because of some of the cases that have unfolded in America. So in addition to the COVID-19, I know that people in the UK are commenting on what's happening now in response to the death of George Floyd. And before that, the death of Breonna Taylor, as well as the death of Ahmaud Arbery. These are outrageous, egregious cases involving white police officers and unarmed Black citizens. I'm curious to know, as a member of Parliament, as you look to the United States, what's your reaction to what you're seeing happening here?
Well, I watched the video concerning the sad death of George Floyd. And I was horrified. I really was horrified. It was the knee on the neck for at least 5 minutes. So there has to be accountability. There has to be due process. Speed is not the thing. It has to be the right result. But there has to be accountability. There are protests. I understand the anger, and it's right that they should protest, but not violently, not to destroy their neighborhood, because the whole world is watching. We're watching in London.
Well said, my friend. It's good to talk to you, and I understand you're going to come back on the program, and you're, of course, as welcome as often as you like. I'd like to hear more of what's happening in the UK and the communities over there, and certainly it's a place that I love so much, and I'm just glad we could have this conversation, albeit through a difficult time, but you've lifted us up with your great words of your pearls of wisdom there. God bless you, sir.
God bless you, Kelly. Thank you.
Lord John Taylor of Warwick, you'll see him back here on this program. He'll probably make a weekly visit to us. I'm holding him to it. We'll be back with the show right after this. Welcome back to the program. So we have been challenged for these past 90 plus days since COVID-19 hit. And one of the things that I've been talking about on this show for quite some time now with George and Tandra Gregory, who are my friends and my next guests, is how do we strengthen the family? And certainly we've talked about how we strengthen the family in the midst of a pandemic. But now, because of the things that we've seen going throughout the country, we're talking about how do we strengthen the family and keep the family strong in the midst of the epidemic of the violence that we see spilling over because of the tragic, outrageous, and unfortunate death of George Floyd. And the list goes on about how many African-American men, women, and children have been killed, unarmed people killed at the hands of police officers or white citizens who claimed that they were acting in the defense of their community. So George and Tandra, love you guys. And you have Journey for Life as relationship coaches, marriage coaches. You're helping the NFL in such a great way by being chaplains there for the Los Angeles Chargers. We've seen violence erupt and demonstrations erupt in Los Angeles all across the nation. And it's heartbreaking to see this. But yet it's understandable. But it's also more heartbreaking because of what we saw happen with George Floyd.
Right.
That was someone's son. That was someone's brother. And we've seen how the family has come out in support of him. And we, the people, need to support him as well. But what do we tell our families?
Yeah. Well, it's a praying time, but it's an acting time. And let me just open us up and just say, even myself, I typically know the answers to give, but sometimes you just don't know. And I think we have to be comfortable in that. Like, I don't know how to soothe certain African-American men right now. I don't know if my friends know how to soothe what I'm going through. My wife might not know how to soothe what I'm going through. It could be the death. It could be, the murder. It could be the riots. It could be COVID-19 health or loss of a job. But sometimes we're not going to know what to do. It's just pulling up to that table and being present and saying, I'm with you. Yeah. I see you. I feel you. I understand as much as I can. And yet I'm there. I don't have to fix you. You see, men, we sometimes are like Bob the Builder. That's a cartoon. And Bob the Builder, he didn't do anything wrong. He was made to fix things. And sometimes we feel like we have to fix things. And yet there's sometimes that we just have to sit. Yeah. And we've just got to acknowledge that although I know you're in pain, although I don't have the answer, I'm just with you.
Yeah. And I, echo that, right? Sometimes we feel like let's just push our emotions down and just keep moving forward. And especially in the Black community, it's kind of like put your head down and just keep pushing past all your emotions. But true healing takes place when we can pause and we can sit and we can be present with our emotions and just let ourselves feel, right? And allowing ourselves to feel and grieve, because this is sad. This is, brings up anger. This brings up all types of emotions. But as a family, we just have to support each other by allowing each other to express how we're feeling and give each other that ear. Also, just to validate each other's feelings. I'm a Black female, but I know that on an even deeper level, my Black husband and my Black son are feeling it in ways that I wouldn't even be able to comprehend. But I have to seek that understanding and that desire and that empathy for what they must be feeling. And I'm feeling it on a whole different level as someone who loves the Black men in my life, So just really allowing yourself to feel and be present and support each other.
Yeah. Tondra and George Gregory, thank you both. I hear you loud and clearly. We need to react. We need to respond. We need to take action for a course correction in America. And now is the time, not tomorrow, now. I appreciate you both, as always, and look forward to always having you on the show as we seek to make our families stronger by strengthening the family with your words of wisdom. And certainly we needed that today. We'll be back with more of the show after this. Welcome back to the program. And now for my final word. Dr. Tony Evans is the founder of the Urban Alternative. He's also the pastor of Oak Cliff Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. And he has quite a look at racism in America. He states this: racism is not first and foremost a skin problem. It is a sin problem. See, when you believe that racism is a skin problem, you can take 300 years of slavery, court decisions, marches, and the federal government involvement and still not get it fixed right. Certainly, Dr. Tony Evans has a very valid point. We still have a lot of work to do in America to get our racial problems fixed right. And it begins with being righted, ignited, and united to stop spreading hate and start spreading love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
Mankind won't survive if our hearts beat inside a hateful rhythm. You see, love isn't bought, but comes with a price of forgiveness, and we all bleed the same. Yeah. If you don't feel it now, just wait. It's coming on, the love train. Just give it time, give it time. Get on board. That means you and you and you.